Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Aram. After 2 years of conflict, Israelis and Palestinians reunited with loved ones in a hostage and prisoner exchange. As key ceasefire issues persist, U.S. President Donald Trump visited Israel just before heading to Egypt to co-host the Gaza Peace Summit. Reportedly, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's last-minute plan to participate at the summit was met with strong opposition among the leaders. Turkish President Erdoğan also attended the meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh, where the U.S., Qatar, Egypt, and Türkiye signed the Gaza ceasefire deal. Their declaration called for tolerance, dignity, and collective prosperity. Trump praised the countries, including Türkiye, for their mediation efforts. On the sidelines of the summit, Erdogan told UK Premier Starmer that a lasting peace in Gaza can only be reached with a two-state solution. While discussions are underway for the second phase of the deal, Trump made no mention of Palestinian statehood at the meeting. Now, thousands of displaced people continue to make their way back to the devastated Gaza City as humanitarian aid pours into the enclave. But will the ceasefire lead to a lasting peace? For more, joining me now from Paris's Sheikh Group founder and CEO Salman Sheikh, from Istanbul Medeniyet University Associate Professor Helin Sarıertem, and from Lisbon, Crisis Group Middle East and North Africa Program Director Riccardo Fabiani. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining me. A lot's happened over the past week, a ceasefire deal, a summit in Sharm el-Sheikh. There's been a lot of dialogue amongst many world leaders. Salman, I want to begin with you. The conference in Sharm el-Sheikh, was this a photo op? Is there genuine desire to see an end to this fighting? How important was that?
Good to be with you, Yusuf. Yes, it was a made-for-TV moment. Let's see if it's a made-for-peace moment. I think it is, and it does show, despite the sort of theatrics of it, that there is a serious effort now to create a durable ceasefire where the killing stops. But as we speak, we're hearing word that, in fact, 5 Palestinians have been killed. The Israeli army says that they were encroaching the withdrawal line. Remember, Israel still controls over 50% of Gaza. So it tells us the really hard work ahead of us. But Sharm el-Sheikh was important in that it brought the United States president, who's put his personal profile on this, together with the key Arab, Islamic, and European leaders, who are now going to have a lot of hard work to do if we're to be able to get this to the eternal peace that President Trump talks about.
Helen, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was also there. Trump's been praising him a lot, especially on Gaza and working together. How important was it for Erdogan to be there? And do you think he's pleased with the results of the meeting?
Well, I think Turkey is generally pleased with the results, and it was important for the American president, in Turkey's eyes especially, to be praised by the American president. But still, I do think that Turkey has some concerns as well. So what I see from President Erdogan as his views regarding yesterday's summit and Trump's talk in Israel, I think Turkey is quite careful and knows that all of the parties should be really willing and decisive enough to pursue this process, because it's just the start of a bigger event, because it's just the beginning, it's not the end. And we are not talking about a permanent peace at the moment. We are just talking about the ceasefire, and there are concerns like what the United States and especially Israel's view will be regarding a unified, a recognized free Palestinian state. So there are some unclear things, but still, I think both Turkey as well as the other parts of the world, they know that it is important to end the bloodshed, and they did that yesterday. So it is an historic moment.
Mm-hmm. Riccardo, one of the big issues that was discussed in Sharm el-Sheikh was the possibility of a stabilization force or a peacekeeper force. Do you think that's going to really materialize? Will Israel allow it? And how important is that peacekeeper force being in place for the continuity or perpetuity of this peace deal or ceasefire agreement, let's call it for now?
So the stabilization force is really one of the key issues or potentially stumbling blocks, right, on the way towards a sustainable ceasefire. It plays a very important role because it means that there is some sort of interposition force between Israel and the Palestinian population, first of all. But most importantly, it is also supposed to play another potential role, which remains at the moment extremely contentious, which is the idea of disarming Hamas, which, again, there is no consensus yet and no willingness by Hamas to actually take part in this. So the details and also the contours, the outline of the stabilization force remains completely unclear at this stage. And it's one of those issues, one of those things that is likely to become extremely complex in the next weeks and months as we try and move from, the truce to a more sustainable and lasting ceasefire in Gaza.
Mm-hmm. Salman, I mean, Gaza isn't the only place that the Israelis have attacked over the past 2 years. I mean, there's been Yemen, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Qatar, great many countries. Now, does this ceasefire in Gaza, will that have a trickle-down effect on the region, or is Israel just shifting its focus from Gaza to other actors in the region?
Well, you heard President Trump talk about peace in the Middle East. That doesn't mean Gaza alone then. So he also talked about how Israel was very much a country, a small country, as he called it, that can't fight the rest of the world. So with that, let's just hope that sort of Israel's more expansionist attacks in those regional areas, as well as in the West Bank, and I think that's a key question as well, stop. Because if they don't, it's going to still create an environment, even if the Israelis try to compartmentalize each of these countries. So one hopes that, for example, on Lebanon, an agreement can be reached for the full Israeli withdrawal. In the case of Syria, more pressure is exerted so that they do not continue to divide or seek to divide and vassalize Syria, and that its government and other Syrians are able to come together. And going back to the West Bank, that we see more pressure now, if we are talking about peace, on the West Bank settlers and the government ministers who have been supporting such activity against the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm. Helen, I want to ask you a little about the region and its security. I mean, starting with the Qatar attack, the summit in Doha, when we look at the UNGA, the meeting between Trump and the Muslim leaders, Erdogan sitting right next to him there, the Egyptian foreign minister at the Doha meeting proposing some type of collective defensive arrangement, a NATO-like arrangement that would include Egypt and Türkiye, shouldering the defensive burden. So it seems like there's some talk about a regional security architecture. I mean, this is nothing new, but it seems more serious and more urgent than it has in the past. Can you see the region getting together to have a deter Israel but contain Iran type of arrangement?
Well, I think we still have some more time to achieve something like that. But I also think that we are getting closer and closer because of the incidents becoming one after the other. First of all, Israel is a security threat in the region, and all the regional countries, especially the Gulf countries, as well as Türkiye, we are all witnessing this aggressiveness of Israel. And we know that as the regional countries, we know that we have to do something, at least to start a kind of collective initiative to be somehow much more deterrent. But beside that, I think there are lots of disagreements between these countries. There are lots of things that should be solved further on, but we are getting closer to that. And I should also underline that this is something the United States also wants. The United States, whether this is Biden administration or Trump administration, They expect the regional countries to solve their issues, to solve their problems themselves, rather than waiting for the United States to come and solve the problem instead of them. For that reason, I guess both the United States view and the regional countries' perspective are somehow converging with each other.
Ricardo, I mean, October 7th, 2 years ago, Netanyahu's main objective, at least what he stated, was to destroy Hamas. I think we can all agree that Hamas is not destroyed. They are still there. Does this ceasefire deal weaken or stronger them and make them stronger? And what's their future?
So this is, again, one of those major, massive issues that remain, I would say, not clearly defined yet, and are part of the ambiguity that surrounds this breakthrough, right? This diplomatic breakthrough, this plan to end the war in Gaza. So Hamas, as you correctly said, is still there, right? They haven't been wiped out. They haven't left the Strip. They haven't yet disarmed. And yet at the same time, the request, the implicit or explicit request seems to be, particularly from the Israeli side, that they do disarm and they are not involved in the future governance of the Strip, and that they might even take the road of the exile. And there is no consensus around that. Will that happen? Will any of these things happen? Now, we know that Hamas is okay with leaving the governance of the Strip to a technocratic committee, and there is a consensus around that. But are they ready to disarm? What kind of disarmament could take place? What kind of evolution could Hamas initiate from a military to a political organization? All of these questions are suspended because we don't know yet what kind of consensus will congeal around the implementation of the plan, and most importantly, what the Americans will eventually decide that needs to be done in the future. So this is, I would say, the kind of ambiguities that we're currently dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Salma, I want to reverse the question to you and ask about Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, is this a win for him? Is this a loss for him? I mean, when we look at the rhetoric coming out of his mouth over the past couple months, it looks like this is kind of a Trump imposing this deal on him, saying, you got to take this deal, you got to take it now, we're going to sign it, smile for the cameras. That's what it kind of looks like. I mean, is this going to help him domestically at least?
Well, President Trump was a bit late. We all knew that, in fact, President Biden was too late. We all knew that an American president, once he says no and means it, it means no. And in the end, Bibi Netanyahu understood that. Look, I believe Netanyahu, perhaps with the help of the Trump administration, is going to try to paint a slightly different narrative. The election campaign in Israel has probably already started. Let's see if his coalition holds together in the short to medium term. In any case, we are going to have elections probably by mid 2026. So here is Benjamin Netanyahu, the arch chameleon, trying to shed another sort of skin of his lizard skin that he's got, and trying to paint himself now as somebody who still is the guy who can guarantee Israel's security. At least for now, the Israeli public haven't bought it. But neither is it a foregone conclusion that we've seen the end of Benjamin Netanyahu. I think what's most important now is that the American administration, together with Turkiye and key other Arab allies, underscore what are we working towards. We're, of course, working towards a Palestinian state, the right of Palestinians to self-determine, alongside the state of Israel. That is what will really set the cat amongst the pigeons when it comes to Benjamin Netanyahu's future, because he, and in fact, the Knesset in which President Trump spoke to yesterday, have not accepted the idea of a Palestinian state. And we saw in Sharm el-Sheikh, in the sort of brief declaration, I think there's no mention of a Palestinian state there either. If we don't have an end goal, then people like Benjamin Netanyahu will continue to find ways to reinvent themselves and make sure that they are still there and determining the lives of Palestinians, of Israelis, and those in the rest of the region.
Mm-hmm. Helen, I want to ask you a little about the Türkiye-Israel bilateral. Now, it seems that Turkish President Erdogan is keen on having Turkish troops be part of the stabilization force. Obviously, that's not going to sit well with Netanyahu having Turkish troops in Gaza. Erdogan's also very keen on securing and stabilizing Syria, working together with Damascus, which is an area that Israel's very interested in as well. So it seems that the Turkish military footprint in Syria and participation in the force in Gaza could escalate tensions even further. Will it escalate tensions? Could it bring stability? How's that going to play out? I mean, you have two very vocal leaders in Netanyahu and Erdogan, neither wanting to take a step back.
Well, regarding Turkish-Israeli relations, I should admit that this is a difficult relationship, so it's not easy. But since 1948, there has been going somehow ups and downs in between two countries, and there's no cut. Somehow the two countries know that without their contact, without their dialogue, the regional affairs cannot move on. So these are the two key players of the region, and they should find a way to talk to each other and find a solution regarding the Palestinian issue, regarding Syria's future. And I think here the key role, and especially mediatory role, is in the United States, especially in the Trump administration's hands. So the Trump administration wants, like the other US administrations, the two significant partners of the United States to talk to each other and somehow to continue their dialogue. If possible, cooperation is wonderful. If not, at least to stay at the table rather than fighting each other. So I don't expect the escalation neither in Syria nor in Gaza, but I do expect the two countries find a way of compromise, somehow a way of finding a kind of middle solution. And here, the key role, as I said, belongs to the United States of America.
Mm-hmm. Ricardo, another major issue is obviously the rebuilding. I mean, we've seen the visuals from Gaza. It's basically just completely flattened. I mean, it's going to take years, hundreds of billions of dollars, most likely. Who's going to pay for it? Should Israel be made to pay for it? And the EU, what type of role do you envision them having in a rebuilding process? Will they be active, or will it be something they're not keen on participating in?
I would say it's clear that the Israelis are not interested or willing to provide any kind of financial support or contribution to the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. It would be, I would say, quite unusual for them to do so. The typical arrangement that was also taken into consideration earlier when the Egyptians with their Arab brothers tried to organize this conference, and they tried to basically sketch a plan for the day after in Gaza, was always that the Gulf countries with the EU would provide a significant chunk of the financial support, the financial needs for the reconstruction of Gaza. And I believe that this is still more or less what we are talking about nowadays, with potential additional contributions from other players. I don't think there are many other options available on the table. Of course, international financial institutions could also play a role in this, but the truth is that it's the Gulf and the EU that would probably shoulder the large part of the financial burden when it comes to rebuilding Gaza.
Mm-hmm. Salman, when we look at the UNGA and now the deal at Sharm el-Sheikh, I mean, the recognition at the UNGA, now a ceasefire, is this a journey towards a two-state solution, or we shouldn't tie in recognition in the ceasefire with the two-state solution? That's a different diplomatic and political avenue that needs to be advanced.
It has to be the journey to a two-state solution, because otherwise there won't be peace. As I said before, we need to have a viable, acceptable end goal, which is something that the region has already spoken to since 2002. I was at the Beirut Arab Summit where that offer was made by the key Arab states. And now that has been joined by the OIC countries and the Islamic countries, I believe. as well. But there is a journey to go here. And let me recognize, by the way, you mentioned the UN General Assembly, you mentioned Sharm. We've seen actually quite a period of extraordinary diplomacy where President Trump has been at the center of it, but where we've seen regional states, unlike when I was in the quartet, with the UN envoy and the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, very much involved. And you need that kind of balancing. We can't have a situation whereby which American officials and mediators are quietly discussing with the Israelis what they can and cannot do in some sort of cozy stitch-up. That is what has led to the failure of the so-called peace process over the years. And let me just add, that is what has led to such situations as how do you bring the Palestinians in to be an afterthought in negotiations? For me, a key part of going forward is how do you build Palestinian unity? How do you build a multi-party agreement in parallel to the international efforts to bring the Israelis on board, to get a negotiating framework going, and then to have that negotiation towards the two-state. We need that multi-party agreement, rather like, and there are many parallels that have been made, for example, with Northern Ireland, where we had a multi-party Northern Irish Party agreement, which underpinned the move towards the Good Friday Agreement. Then issues such as disarming and decommissioning and even the demilitarization aspects can be really taken up. Without that Palestinian unity, I think it's going to be quite difficult. Look, Yusuf, I believe that in the next year, we can have that. We can have Palestinian even elections. And I believe within the term of the Trump administration, within 3 years, we can have a Palestinian state alongside Israel. And that's how I would like to see Sharm and the UNGA in an optimistic way towards that end. If we're not doing that, then I'm afraid we're going to see a breakdown, and we're going to see it quicker than we think.
Mm-hmm. Helen, that's quite an ambitious statement made by Salman. Do you agree with them? I mean, do you think in the next 3 years before the Trump administration is concluded that we'll see a two-state solution, that this momentum will continue?
Well, I don't think that would be that quick. I mean, I hope it will, but there are some concerns in my mind. So the United States, especially since the very beginning, they've been biased. They've been moving and talking instead of Israel all the time. So although we are talking about mediation, unfortunately, the balance is always on the Israeli side. For that reason, if the United States, but first of all, if Israel does not understand the right of Palestinians to exist and to have their free state, unfortunately, the escalation of the conflict will show itself again. So I do agree that the significant point is at least to recognize the natural rights of the Palestinians to have their free state, unified state. And up until now, we haven't come to that situation. But I also know that if you want to make a ceasefire, if you want to bring so many parties together at the same table, you should start with simple stuff. And they started with simple stuff. Mm-hmm. And the details are unfortunately not told yet. They are not told yet. They are not discussed well. And one of the significant points is about the Palestinian statehood. So as long as the parties, especially Israelis and Palestinians, do not recognize each other's well-being, existential rights, unfortunately, there is a huge danger in front of us in the coming days.
Ricardo, I want your quick take on this as well. Is Trump the man that's finally going to bring about a two-state solution?
Now, there is basically a desire, or let's say a flexibility, a willingness to break some taboos, to go beyond certain limits that are quite typical of US politics when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian issue. But I also don't think that President Trump is really that committed or interested in this issue specifically, and most importantly, in making a Palestinian state happen, unfortunately. And so this is, I would say, a little bit the contradiction that we are facing nowadays, and a little bit also, I would say, the limits of what we can reasonably expect from this administration in Washington.
Well, who knows, maybe getting that two-state solution might be what he needs to get that elusive Nobel Peace Prize that he seems to covet very, very much. We are out of time. Salman, Helen, and Ricardo, thanks for unpacking this issue with me. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aram. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can find more exclusive content. Until next time, take care and goodbye.